Happy Thursday, everybody. Pastor Steve here. Thank you for being with me for today's devotion. We are in the 14th chapter of Matthew's Gospel in the New Testament. So open your Bible there, and want to encourage you to be praying. We have a mission team that's down at the coast, down on the Grand Strand this coming weekend. On Saturday, they're going to be serving with a Chinese church plant, a new Chinese church that we're supporting, prayer walking certain communities and locations and so on. And then on Sunday, they will be worshiping with Coastway Church, which is near the campus of Coastal Carolina on the other side of Conway, and helping them. This is a church that has to set up their worship because they're in a school. They have to take stuff in and out every Sunday. So we're going to be our team's going to be helping them with that one week to give their volunteers who do this every week a break and being there just to encourage them, pray with them, and do some other things to serve with them. And Coastway is another church that we are supporting. We're also helping with a new church start or church plant, we call them nowadays, in the Charleston area, because the coastal area of South Carolina is now the fastest growing place in America. It's also where we as evangelicals and Southern Baptists in particular are the weakest when it comes to South Carolina. And so the need to start new churches there is tremendous. So we're helping these 3 new churches, and we've got a team down there working with 2 of them this weekend. So you be praying for them and for those new church plants down in the Grand Strand area. Okay, you have in chapter 14, a little teaching before I get to my devotion, you have Herod the Tetrarch mentioned, and then you have his brother Philip. And if you've studied the New Testament very much, then you know it can get really confusing because you see some version of the name Herod a lot, okay? And it's almost like you need a family tree or a flow chart to keep up with all the Herods, their wives, and all of their children that are mentioned in the New Testament. Is the one mentioned here the same one that's mentioned somewhere else? Like many royals of that time period, these kings, including the Herods, would marry off their daughters to other royals, including relatives at times. They would have many wives and many children, and therefore there were often a lot of half-brothers and half-sisters, and it just gets really confusing. So in chapter 14, verse 1, it says, at that time, Herod the Tetrarch. Tetrarch is the word for 4. King Herod the Great, that's how he's normally referred to in history. Herod the Great was the ruler of a large area that included more than just Judea and Galilee at the time Jesus was born. He had ruled for more than 3 decades before Jesus was born, in fact, and he's the one that enlarged the Jewish temple that was there in Jesus' day. That's the reason it's sometimes referred to as Herod's temple. He enlarged it and beautified it. And he was a ruthless ruler, but a very effective ruler in some other ways. And when he died, he divided his empire, his kingdom. And of course, he was ruling a large area under the authority of the Roman Empire. The Romans actually appointed King Herod. And when he died, he divided his kingdom, so to speak, into 4 sections, and each of his 4 sons received part of it. So this Herod the Tetrarch here is actually Herod Antipas, who ruled Galilee. And Philip is Herod Philip, who ruled a different region, and they were half-brothers. And Herod Antipas was visiting his half-brother Philip once, and when there, started an affair with his half-brother Philip's wife. And in time, she left her husband Philip, divorced him, and she wanted to marry Herod Antipas. And this is the Herod that John confronted, saying what you're doing is not according to the Jewish law. And of course, Philip's ex-wife, Herod's new lady, if you will, is the one who got her daughter after dancing to ask for John the Baptist's head. Now, there are other Herods in the New Testament. So just understand when you see the word Herod, it doesn't mean they're talking about the same one necessarily. It's complicated. But here, these are half brothers, both sons by different wives of Herod the Great, who killed the boys, the baby boys, when Jesus was born. This is his two sons here. So just a little biblical background, especially for those of you who enjoy that kind of stuff. Sordid affairs, you could say. Now, devotionally, I want to talk about emotions, because I think there's two examples, actually two contrasting examples of dealing with emotions in this chapter. One that's a bad example, a negative example. One that's a good example, a positive example. And the negative example of dealing with emotions is Herod Antipas. You could say he had a problem with lust. I mean, think about what we already said in the opening verses here, starting an affair with his half-brother's wife. That's a guy who couldn't control his lust. He saw something, he wanted something, and he went after it. And then when John the Baptist was arrested in the opening verses here, you've read this, there's this feast, if you will, with important dignitaries present, and Herod Antipas' new woman, Herodias, who was formerly his half-brother's wife, her daughter dances for them, and apparently she had to do it really well because Herod Antipas gets carried away. His lust took over, and emotionally he just offered her almost anything, and then her mother encouraged her to ask for John the Baptist's head on a platter. And his emotions, he could not let himself be embarrassed by going back on his word in front of all those dignitaries, and he's in a bind now because he got carried away emotionally with his lust when she was dancing. I mean, when you read the story, guys, it doesn't use those words, but that's what's going on here, okay? And the result was he had John the Baptist beheaded. And it's amazing how many really bad decisions people make because they get carried away with their emotions. And it's not just lust. It can be anger. It can be disappointment. It can be jealousy. It can be lack of confidence. It can be all kinds of things where the emotions just take over and we make really, really bad decisions that hurt us, that hurt other people. You could say in some ways that Herod Antipas was a man ruled by his emotions. And the reality is when we allow emotions to rule us, we're at risk of a lot of bad decisions. Now, the other example in contrast to that is Jesus and how he responded, how he dealt with his emotions when he learned that John the Baptist had been beheaded, executed. So we picked the story up in verse 12, his disciples, not Jesus' disciples, but John's. So John the Baptist's disciples came and took away the body, John the Baptist's body, after he was beheaded. Remember, this woman had the head. All they got was the body, and they buried it. And then they went and reported to Jesus. So they buried John the Baptist's headless body, then went and told Jesus what had happened. Now notice verse 13. When Jesus heard about John, he withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself. And when the people heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when he went ashore, he saw a large crowd. So Jesus is wanting to retreat to a lonely place, quiet place, just to deal with his grief over the death of his cousin. And I would imagine also the knowledge that one day, not too far in the future, he will be executed as well. I mean, he knew that. And he gets in the boat. Now, he can't go to the secluded place because there's a crowd waiting for him when he gets to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. The seclusion was the boat. Sometimes you have to get really creative to find seclusion, quiet, and alone. So he's in the boat, he gets out of it, and there's a large crowd. And in verse 14, rather than being angry that they were preventing him from going to his quiet place up on the mountain, and verse 14, when he went ashore, he saw a large crowd and he felt compassion for them. and he healed their sick. Then when it was evening, he tells the disciples to get in the boat and go somewhere else. He'll join them later. And then Jesus personally sends the crowd away, and he goes up on the mountain to pray. After he feeds them and sends the crowd away, he goes up on the mountain to pray. Now, what's the lesson for us? Jesus, and you read down there in verse 22, immediately he made the disciples get in the boat, go ahead of him, etc. He sent the crowds away. 23, and after he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. So he had two alone times, one in the boat, and then after he sent the crowds away, after feeding them and healing them, up on the mountain alone. Jesus dealt with his grief. He didn't just stay busy and ignore it, stuff it down. He dealt with it. But he did not also allow his grief to cause him to withdraw from people, to withdraw from life. Well, you say he got alone. Yes. But notice, when his plan was interrupted by the crowd, he didn't get mad at them. He didn't run them off. He ministered to them. He felt compassion. And then he went on up on the mountain. It's easy for emotions to make us feel anger, to make us feel this, to make us feel that. Jesus, I guess you could say, he responded to his situation rather than just reacting to it. And his response was, yes, I need to deal with it, and I need to be alone. So he got in the boat. Then when his quiet time was interrupted, he didn't react. He responded to that moment, to the needs of the crowd, and he loved them, and he served them. And then he responded again by, after sending them away, after he cared for them and sent them away, he went on up on the mountain. And so he found a way to balance the demands of life and his need to be alone. So Jesus is responding. He's not reacting. When we are ruled by our emotions, we tend to react. When we are not ruled by our emotions, we tend to make intelligent, intentional decisions responding to the moment. And I think that contrast between Herod Antipas and Jesus can teach us a lot about doing life when it's not easy. That's the word for today, guys. I look forward to being with you tomorrow as we look at chapter 15. God bless you.